Welcome to the world of Plan Lascara, an exoplanet in the Horus system. This planet has been selected by humans to harbor the project known as Project Anolis. Project Anolis is a scientific experiment to study what it was like during the Carboniferous. This experiment involves a group of anoles and a variety of other animals, fungi, and plants being left without human interference to see how they would diversify in this new context. Anoles were selected as the main species for this experiment because they have been proven to be very adaptable as they can take up new niches in a very short amount of time. Most other life on Plan Lascara selected by humans are invertebrates, as they are very good food sources for the anoles. Anoles usually inhabit small islands, so they were also selected to see how they can diversify with nearly no competition. Salamanders were also added because the Carboniferous was full of amphibians, and they needed to choose a basal amphibian for this project. All other vertebrates introduced were fish, with a single lobed finned fish, 4 rayed finned fish, and single jawless fish. Most of these were added to simulate the freshwater ecosystems of the Carboniferous. The only fish group left out were the cartilaginous fish. Now, let's get into the abiotic features, then finally seed life. Before we get into seeded life, we have to talk about the abiotic features. Abiotic features are non-biological stuff about a planet, like what star it orbits and atmosphere composition. It is very important to understand this before we get into any biological stuff. First of all, the planet Plan Lascara orbits two K-type stars. The larger star is named Horus 1. It is around 0.9 solar masses. The smaller star, Horus 2, is only around 0.6 solar masses. There are 9 planets in the system total. The first 2 planets in the solar system are both too hot for life. The first one is a rocky planet covered in craters similar to Mercury, but is around the size of Venus. The second planet is a Mercury-sized planet more similar to Venus than Mercury, covered in volcanoes and with a thick atmosphere. The third, fourth, and fifth planets are all habitable, but we will be focusing on the fourth one because the third and the fifth are someone else's business. The last 4 planets are all gas giants. Planet 6 has 3 sets of rings going around vertical, horizontal, and diagonal across the planet. The second one only has 1 set of rings, and the last 2 are both ice giants, both having 2 thin sets of rings similar to those of Neptune or Uranus. Now, let's focus on Plan Lascara, the 4th planet from the 2 suns. It has a set of rings going all around it. The planet also has 2 moons. The first one, named Boreas, is a large rocky moon around the size of Earth's moon, and is even around the same size. The other moon, Australis, is a small moon around the size of Saturn's moon Enceladus, which is also an icy moon. It is unknown if it has a liquid ocean or not. Plan Lascara has a mass around 0.95 Earth masses. It also has a diameter of 0.95 and a gravitational pull of 9.5 times that of Earth. The planet's year is around 406 Earth days due to it orbiting a bit farther out than Earth does. This planet's days are significantly shorter than Earth's at around 22 hours. Planet Lascara also has an axial tilt of 24 degrees, very similar to Earth. An interesting thing about Planet Lascara is that it spins clockwise, which is opposite of Earth. The planet is considerably warmer than Earth, with high amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere. So Planet Lascara is pretty similar to that of the late Cretaceous when it comes to climate. The atmosphere of the Neocene is mostly nitrogen, making up around 70% of the atmosphere. The atmosphere is also made up of quite a bit of oxygen, making 20% of the atmosphere. The third most numerous component of the atmosphere is argon, which only makes up about 0.9% of the atmosphere. 1.1% of the atmosphere is made up of other gases, most of this being CO2. Now, since we're done with the abiotic factors, let us move on to the seeded life. To have a working ecosystem, you can't just have a single species. you have to have multiple species working together to make an ecosystem function. This list will go into depth of all the different introduced species on the planet of Planis Lascara and see what role they fill in the ecosystem. It is important to remember, though, that certain groups like prokaryotes, protists, fungi, nematodes, tardigrades, rotifers, and others are too numerous to logistically cover, so we will have to skip over them. Plants fill one of the most important roles in the ecosystem, as they fill the air with oxygen, stabilize the soil, and most importantly provide a crucial source of energy to anything else that lives here, as they form the base of the food chain. We will now go through a list of introduced plants and how many species were introduced from each. The non-vascular plants include mosses and liverworts, with about 1,000 species each. Ferns include the western sword fern, the bracken, and horsetails, with horsetails having 10 species and the bracken being all in the genus. Gymnosperms include the ginkgo tree, and angiosperms include the bamboo, 10 species, timothy grass, all in the genus, blue grass, 100 species, grama grass, 20 species, wild barley, dandelions, 10 species, clovers, 125 species, plantains, 30 species, wild carrot, ivy, all in its genus, blueberry bush, domestic lettuce, Lactuca tuberosa, daffodils, all in the genus, hibiscus, 20 species, and basil. Also included is Elodia in all of its genus. Vertebrates don't always have a crucial role in the ecosystem, but they are the main focus of the project, and all other species introduced to the planet were introduced for the vertebrates to have a functioning home when they arrive. Most vertebrates introduced to Planis Lascara were fish, 6 total, but 2 species of pteropods were introduced. Now it is time to go into depth on the 8 vertebrate introduced. The brook lamprey was introduced mainly to represent the jawless fish of the Carboniferous and to fill similar roles of that of the Carboniferous ones did. Australian lungfish were introduced not just to represent lobed finfish, but to see how lobed finfish would compete against ray finfish. The bowfin was introduced to represent the ray finfish, since they fill a similar niche to Australian lungfish, so they are a perfect fit to see how these lineages will adapt to each other's competition. The only reason the sterlet was introduced was because the person who was in charge of terraforming the planet had a kid who really liked sturgeon. Interesting things about rainbow darters is that they were initially not a part of the project plan of introduction, but later they discovered that the bowfin and lungfin needed a food source, so they chose this fish out of the many others just because it looked pretty. The common bully was also introduced as a food source for the lungfish and bowfin, and were chosen because they were pulled out of a bowl of little papers, folded up a bunch to see if other fish could have been chosen. Tiger salamanders were chosen to represent the amphibians of the Carboniferous, mainly because the Carboniferous was known for its amphibians. Bahamian anoles were chosen to represent the small anole niche of the Carboniferous out of a bunch of others, mainly due to their lack of specialization compared to a lot of other lizards. Invertebrates will also fill important roles in the ecosystem. For example, they help break down organic matter, pollinate plants, and provide food for the introduced vertebrates. We start our list with the ichneoderms, focusing on red starfish and all of its genus. Flatworms, excluding the parasitic kind, will include land and freshwater planarians with 20 species each. Mollusks will include pond snails with 30 species, whelks with 20 species, garden snails and all of its genus, land slugs, sea lemons, Spanish dancers, clams, and mussels with 900 species. Annelids will include earthworms with 400 species, freshwater leeches with 100 species of non-parasitic leeches, and bristleworms with 700 species. Crustaceans will include marine hermit crabs, 20 species, strawberry hermit crab, mud crabs and all of its genus, signal crayfish, freshwater shrimp in all of its genus, pillbugs 110 species, aquatic isopods 300 species of parasitic and non-parasitic alike, copepods 1,500 species, fairy shrimp 1,000 species, gooseneck barnacles all in its genus, acorn barnacles of 20 species, and ostracods with 1,000 species. Chelicerates include the spotted orb weaver, house spiders all in its genus, pseudoscorpions 90 species, vinegaroons, mites 1,200 species of parasitic and non-parasitic alike, and Atlantic horseshoe crabs. Myriapods will include 200 species of millipedes. Hexapods will include non-colonial bees, ants 100 species, midges of 200 species, house crickets 50 species, dragonflies 10 species, burrowing beetles 40 species, ladybugs 10 species, darkling beetles 40 species, silverfish 20 species, aphids 120 species, silk moths, hawk moths 5 species, fruit flies 10 species, housefly, and springtails with 1,100 species. Cnidarians will include box jellyfish 20 species, moon jellyfish in all its genus, sea nettles all in its genus, fried egg jellyfish, hydras 10 species, and fish-eating anemones. Sponges will include the freshwater sponges in all of its genus. If you are interested in Project Anolis, you can join the Anoles Discord, link in the description, and create new animals and plants with us. Don't worry if you aren't confident with your drawing skills, as you can create ideas and submit them for others to create artwork. This series will feature all different episodes about species, genuses, and environments during the different time periods. In the next episode, we will cover the early Neocene and the first true divergence from all the major clades. Thanks to An Average Avocado, our editor, Reptiles, the project owner, and White Glove for helping create this video. Also, White Glove, the narrator and thumbnail artist, has a project known as Project Curia. The link to his channel is in the description.